You're listening to the Irish Spark podcast, where we aim to bring you a progressive worker's perspective through interviews, conversations and readings. In our second episode, fellow Irish Spark host Eugene McCartan interviews Paul Keating, an Australian trade unionist from the newly formed Maritime Union of Australia. Paul tells us about the current state of the working class in Australia from a unique perspective, which we hope you find very interesting.
Yes, g'day Eugene. My name's Paul Keating. I'm the Deputy Branch Secretary of the Maritime Union of Australia, Sydney branch. It's the division, the Maritime division of this new union that's been formed in the last year. It was a union that the rank and file democratically determined that they wanted to be part of this new organisation. And more than 85% of the votes that come in voted in favour of this new union. It is a divisional union that consists of the construction, forestry, maritime, mining and energy union of Australia, and each division represents an industry. With that, the unions are structured the same way that they were before they moved into this divisional union, with a national leadership from each union that oversees the national union itself.
How does your trade unionism differ from how the traditional trade unions are organised?
Well, from the Maritime Union side of things, we say that we are a class-based union. We have continued with a strong political organising and training of workers, I think, throughout the generations, and it's ebbed and flowed at times, but from the Sydney branch perspective, we continue on an organising model, and that's with the leadership of Paul McAleer, our Sydney branch secretary, whereby delegate training and organising is part of the program, but also political training, and by that I mean Marxist training.
And how does your organisation engage with workers, defend workers in regards to employers? The dock and the stevedores and stuff like that tend to be the most ruthless of employers. How have you dealt with them over the years?
Well, the state of play in Australia is that we are under some of the most draconian industrial laws in the developed world. These laws were actually set in place by the previous federal Labor government. It was an industrial act that was put through the Parliament. It's called the Fair Work Act, which was Orwellian in itself, given that it's removed the right for workers to exercise their right to strike, their fundamental right to remove their labour, which is the only mechanism of the working class has in defence of their rights. But also the law itself is designed for the employers. They can very quickly move into, the industrial courts, arguing that it's illegal industrial action. In fact, in Australia, we don't have the right to strike. We have these very small periods in a worker's life where bargaining will be undertaken, and through that period, the ability to take industrial action is there. But that can be overridden by the industrial courts if there's a determination or an argument that the employers put to the courts, and the courts in many occasions say that it's not in the national interest and remove the right for workers to take industrial action.
You have a campaign going for the right to strike.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, we are in this political cycle in Australia from a position as an official of the Maritime Union, but also as a communist and a Maritime Party branch communist. We have a view that the campaign to overthrow these industrial laws, rewrite them, is a position that's very strong in our thinking, and it's the rank and file that very much through their experience of struggle over the last few years have made these determinations, and front and centre of that is the right to strike, and that is the removal of any impediment, any penalty, any incursion, that laws in Australia are in place to remove our ability to defend our right to work, to defend other workers' right to work, and ultimately to defend our communities and, these reactionary governments and reactionary employers. This is happening all the time. And I say to our members, we live in a world where these industrial laws are unjust. You can't work within the system to defend the working class or the membership, the rank and file. And given that they are unjust, we will break those laws. Also, when it comes to the stand and the position on the right to strike and challenging the system itself, laws are never changed without the mobilising of workers and the working class and defying those laws that need to be overthrown. As I said, they were brought in by the Australian Labor Party, who very much has had a platform of neoliberalism. They've used softer language, economic rationalism, but they've, brought in place over the last 30 years these neoliberal policies, and certainly the industrial laws being the most oppressive we've seen. Even when they were in, they didn't remove an industrial law that was in place for construction workers. And people out there might be shocked, but construction workers in Australia were governed under different laws, and they had an agency that basically policed industrial action and union activity and the rights of workers, really to suppress the rights of construction workers to defend what fundamentally is a human right, and that is safe workplace, the right to return home safely from when you went to work. And those laws, under a commission known as the Australian Building and Construction Commission, has been reinstated with the current federal Conservative government, which means that a worker sitting in the tea room, maybe organising some safety activity or campaign, and an organiser comes down to speak with the workers who have asked for them to come down, can be compelled into this commission without representation. And I'm not just talking about it without having a shop steward, a delegate or a union official. They don't have the right to have a lawyer represent them in these closed door commissions where they are compelled to answer every question. And if they refuse, they can be imprisoned for up to 6 months. It goes further than that. And this might be a shock to people listening and workers out there. Civil rights have very subtly been eroded and removed over the last 20, 30 years. And we see the emergence of a police state structure that in Australia, when it comes to industrial laws and the rights of the working class and workers, is that these laws are designed for us to be fearful. Fearful because if you do take industrial action, the employer can not only sack you, they can seek court injunctions in the federal courts, which, if those laws are defied, you're in contempt of those federal court orders. You can be put in prison. And this is a reality in Australia today. On top of that, the employer can also sue workers. Unlawful industrial action incurs for a worker up to $33,000 for that action. And in the face of that, workers across not just our industry, on the docks across Australia, but in other industries, mobilise and take action. They go on strike and defy those laws. And they continue to defy those laws. And unions like ours, and union officials and organisers defy those laws, which incurs enormous penalties on unions. And we're talking about millions of dollars in some cases.
You yourself are subject to fines, aren't you?
Yes, there's a number of cases. I can't go into it, but certainly there's There's a number of cases that we've defended our members in their action. We've supported their right to withdraw their labour for the reasons that they did, and we are unapologetic. The union is facing a few $1 million, as well as Paul McAleer, our branch secretary, and myself. We're talking about these companies are coming after us with substantial fines that we will defend. And as we say to the employees, we will never forget how you act. And we will defend our members no matter what and whatever it takes. We will defy the laws, they're unjust, and we will break them until good laws are made.
There's a current discussion going on in Ireland regarding the Industrial Relations Act, amending the law or repealing the law. In Australia, the trade union movement has got a campaign called Change the Rules. What do you think are the strengths and weaknesses of that particular campaign, and how does your union view that campaign?
Yeah, the Sydney branch of the MUA supports this national Change the Rules campaign, but it has its limitations. I very honestly speak to our members, and our members very honestly speak to their officials, and we make it very clear to our comrades across the movement. Our members say they cannot be rehabilitated, these laws. They must be thrown away and rewritten. Short of that, it's reformist, and given the nature of the struggle for the 7 years that we've had these laws in place, that experience has been devastating to the working class, and workers are angry. They support the campaign to change the rules, but we say we've got to change the system. Also, at the forefront of the campaign, and I'm pleased to say the Sydney branch of the MUA, along with comrade unions, in particular the construction division of our new union, have led from the front a campaign for the right to strike. And that has built momentum. We've had a number of mass delegates meetings around the country within the trade councils, trade union councils, and it has built within the consciousness of organised workers a very strong position. And we've had quite a number of mass rallies and meetings across the country, some of which being some of the biggest in recent memory. Melbourne, for instance, over 120,000 workers marched in the last rally, which was only a few weeks back.
Does the Australian Congress of Trade Unions, does it encourage grassroots mobilisation, or is their strategy to negotiate and lobby with politicians, which is different from an actively engaged and mobilised working class movement?
Yeah, well, I'd say that in our National Council of Trade Unions, it's the ACTU, have moved into a platform of mass mobilisation, and we've had rallies all over the country. Certainly the working class want that. It's from our membership very well received. In fact, there's been a mobilising. In fact, we've had mass meetings. We've shut the port on 7 occasions in the last 2 years in Sydney alone, along with our comrades in the construction division of the union, where we've mobilised the march through the streets of Sydney, raising the consciousness of working class people and the movement itself. I do believe, though, there is very much a strong view within the trade union movement that with this election cycle coming to around, that engagement with the Australian Labor Party to seek those concessions or the position on a whole host of things will be a dialogue. Myself, I believe that we should build a strong working class, and through that, by organising within the trade union movement and building community support, strengthening those positions and then demanding those changes. We live in a time where the power of capitalism controls the political system entirely, and in Australia, for instance, the multinationals, the big end of business basically dictate their position. It's time for us to do the same.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Irish Spark podcast. If you like the show, please give us a review on iTunes or whichever platform you're listening from. It really helps us out and helps the show reach more people. If you would like to get in touch, send us an email at theirishspark@gmail.com. We would love to hear from you. Follow us on social media. We are on Twitter, Facebook and Instagram. Just search for the Irish Spark podcast. We hope to see you again in a couple of weeks for our next show. Take care.